guys, welcome back to another Shadow Priest Mythic Plus commentary video. First things first, I want to say happy holidays. At the time of recording this, it's December 25th, so if you're celebrating Christmas or spending time with family or whatever, I hope that everyone is staying safe, having a wonderful time, and hold your loved ones close. Anyway, so this is 16 Spires of Ascension. I'm going to try in this video to talk more about what I'm doing rotationally, or like mechanically as a Shadow Priest, rather than like the overarching general dungeon stuff, because that kind of stuff can vary key to key, and the rotational stuff is going to be a lot more helpful for the people who are here for Shadow Priest specific stuff. So this first pull that we do is a really big, it's like 2 packs, and we lust. So we're going to line of sight over here. What I want to try and do on this pull is get all my dots on everything as fast as possible. Because I have lust, it's going to make it easier to dot everything. So you can get Vampiric Touch on all 6 targets right here, and then pop Void Form and start blasting with Searing Nightmare. You also want to... I pop everything here. So I pop Power Infusion, I pop my pre-pot, get Vampiric Touch on everything. And then while I'm in Void Form, I'm not... Void Bolt isn't my number 1 priority, because this pack dies way too fast. So, and especially in a pack like that, that's 6 plus targets, you can just drop Void Bolt almost entirely. Only time you really want to use it is when you're like really starved on Insanity, and you don't have enough to be spamming Searing Nightmare. So, I basically just hold off on it. One of the big things that you want to do is when you get these Dark Thoughts procs like this, that's the instant cast Mind Blasts. You never want to use those. The only time... Okay, so the number 1 time you want to use those is while you're channeling a different ability, because they're instant cast and they don't interrupt your channel. So if you can, then you want to use them while you're casting Mind Seer or Mind Flay. But you can also use it as a mobility option. Like, let's say I need to run to the top of the stairs right now. On my way up there, I can press my Mind Blast, and it'll instant cast it, so I can do damage while I'm running. Shadow Priest has 2 instant cast spells outside of the Dark Thoughts. You've got Shadow Word Pain and Shadow Word Death, and you want to use those as much as possible when you're moving. So if you have a really far, like let's say you're in a raid, and you have to move like across the entire room, you could just run across the room, but then your DPS during that time is 0. Well, it's whatever your dots are ticking for. So to maximize your DPS, even if you're just spamming Shadow Word Pain, that's better than doing nothing, because it does damage on hit or on application or whatever. And so as long as you're spamming it, you're doing some damage. Usually what I try to do is Shadow Word Death, as long as there's not a ton of healing that needs to go out, and I'm not super low on health or whatever, I Shadow Word Death first, and then I spam Shadow Word Pain as I run. But that's also why I went Venthyr instead of going Necrolord, is because I wanted Door of Shadows. I wanted to play a Blood Elf for Arcane Torrent. I didn't want to play a Goblin for Goblin Jump. That would have been my other choice. But I went Blood Elf for Arcane Torrent instead, because I've been a Blood Elf the whole time on this character. I like how they look, and I feel like a lot of people rely on Goblin Jump too much, and I get similar effects from Door of Shadows, so I can stay Blood Elf for Arcane Torrent. So right here, same thing. Basically every pack that's like 4 or less, I try to get Vampiric Touch on everything before I start spamming my Mind Seer and Searing Nightmare. On these Pridefuls, it can get pretty intense because it's a 16, right? And the Pridefuls are pretty big. But Shadow Priest is really good for Prideful, in my opinion, because we have a lot of self-healing, so it eases the stress on the healer. Like, our 2 Fire Mages are her main priority during these Pridefuls, because they can like barely heal themselves, although they have some pretty good things for it too. But the Shadow Priests have Devouring Plague, which heals us. I've got Mind Games, which can heal me a little bit. Vampiric Touch is constantly healing us. We have Desperate Prayer, like I just used. I also, depending on your healer, you're going to want to pop Vampiric Embrace on pretty much every Prideful. I pop it around 10 to 14 stacks of the Prideful buff on the manifestation itself. But like I said, it depends on your healer. Some healers, like Resto Shamans especially, you can wait a little bit longer before you use it. But maybe you have a healer who's falling behind, and you just got out of a really big pack or whatever. In that case, I would pop Vampiric Embrace really, really early. Something else I should mention is during these breaks in between packs, when people are dying from Grievous, we always pop Mage Food. Because the Mage Food heals you faster than the Grievous ticks, and even if your healer is dead, the Mage Food will heal you enough to get out of Grievous, as long as you're just sitting there eating. So, little things like that can really help out. So this boss, just 2-target cleave. I'm not going to be using Searing Nightmare here, basically ever. You want to just be in Void form as long as possible. I'm running Hungering Void in this key, so in a 2-target situation like this, Void Bolt is the #1 priority. You'll cancel basically every other spell for it. If you're, let's say you're channeling Mind Flay or whatever, and Void Bolt comes up, you instantly press that. Devouring Plague as much as possible. Like I'm doing here with the Dark Thoughts, you only want to cast it while you're casting Mind Flay or Mind Seer, doesn't matter. But yeah, outside of that, these two share HP, so you want to dot both of them and try to damage both of them as much as you can. That's something that's pretty good about Shadow Priest, is fights like this where they share health, or council fights like the Council of Blood in Castle Nathria. Shadow Priest can dot all three, so you're basically doing 3 times as much dot damage to the overall health pool, because they all share health. Well, they don't share health, but you have to kill all of them. So anyway, I try to stand pretty far away from the Everworm guy so that I can dodge the attenuated barrages. And then whenever I get the spear on me, I try to run it to the edge of the room so that we can have the most distance we can get from them, so that when they do start shooting out that black stuff, we can dodge it. Something that I should have done better on this fight is keeping my dots up on both targets. I let my dots drop on the Flying Angel dude for a while there, which is less than ideal. It's not a huge loss, but if you don't have Vampiric Touch on either of the targets, then they're not going to take any damage from Shadowy Apparitions. And depending on what you're running, talent-wise, that can be a big deal or not as big of a deal. I'm not running the Auspicious Spirits or anything, so they're just taking regular Shadowy Apparition damage. But so on this pack, I pop both cooldowns, both big cooldowns, Power Infusion and Void Form. I dot everything with Vampiric Touch again, because I have the more haste from Power Infusion. And then you just, spam Searing Nightmare as much as you can, as long as they're pretty close to each other. When they start to spread out a little bit, I try to hold my Searing Nightmare and wait for them to group up more. And while they're starting to group up more, you can be using Mind Blast, you can be popping Devouring Plague on them, stuff like that. The other thing I should mention is Shadow Priest benefits from Spiteful pretty big, because you can use, if you're running Death and Madness, like I am in this key, and almost every single key. In fact, I don't know if I've ran anything other than Death and Madness yet this season. You can so the Spiteful kill themselves. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but they take like 8% of their HP every tick or whatever, and they just slowly die. It takes like 12 seconds for them to kill themselves. And your Death and Madness, if you use Shadow Word Death on the Spiteful when it's at like 40% HP or something, you'll get your Death and Madness will proc, because it will die within that time, even if nobody's touching it. So it's really helpful. It's a good way to generate insanity. So whenever I can, I'm trying to, like right here, I'll probably do it. Oh, maybe not. Whenever I can, I'm trying to hit these Spiteful shades with Shadow Word Death, like right there, because then you get just a free 40 insanity for doing nothing, and that helps when you go into new packs and everything. That's something you want to try and do on boss fights, like if the boss summons ads or something, you want to try and Shadow Word Death them as they're dying. so that you can get more insanity gens, so you can do more damage to the boss. It's kind of like funnel damage, where like some classes have abilities where you put a dot on something and it makes your other spells do more damage to the first target. Shadow Priests don't really have that, outside of the fact that you can generate insanity by hitting other things, right? So, yeah, like Shadow Word Deathing something as it's dying. Other than that, yeah, I'm using my trinket as much as possible. The Dreadfire Vassal or Vassal? I think it's Vassal from Denathrius. I got pretty lucky to get a 220 version of that. And then I'm trying to give these Spitefuls as much room as possible. Yeah, and then we're just back into another manifestation of Pride. So here I don't have Vampiric Embrace for the next 19 seconds, which means this is going to be pretty rough. Also, neither of our fire mages are combusting, which means that this is going to be really rough. So our healer will probably pop wings here. Maybe not. I guess we'll see. My Vampiric Embrace is about to come up, and my health pot is still ready. Looks like we didn't end up needing it, so... you don't necessarily have to save Vampiric Embrace for every single Prideful, but as we've been getting into these hierarchies, like we did a 17 of this key, and we've done a 17 Plaguefall as well, and in those hierarchies, it's starting to feel like Prideful is almost a wipe every single time we do it. And I think a lot of groups have that problem where Prideful is just really hard to deal with. So Vampiric Embrace is a huge helper there. So definitely don't be afraid to use it. And probably talk to your healer so that you make sure that they're not popping their cooldowns at the same time as you, in case you're going to need them for later packs or whatever. Usually, if I'm going to pop Vampiric Embrace, then our healer's not going to use Aura Mastery, and she's not going to use Wings or whatever, because I can pick up the majority of the healing during that time. So, in this pack, our focus is the squad leader, so I'm targeting them. I'm trying to keep Vampiric Touch on everything as much as possible. It's okay to let it fall off a little bit, but anytime you don't have Vampiric Touch on something, like I said before, you're not going to get any Shadowy Apparition damage on it. So I should have Vampiric Touched this target a lot earlier. I ended up just not Vampiric Touching it again. Right now, nothing has Vampiric Touch on it, and I'm starting to reapply it here. The Shadowy Apparition damage isn't huge, and it's usually not, like, in the top 6 even of the damage that I do in a key. But part of that might be because I don't have great uptime on Vampiric Touch, and the other part of that is that I'm not running the Haunting Apparitions conduit, which would make them do more damage, and I'm not running Shadowy Apparitions, or whatever the talent's called, that makes them do more damage. So I'm mostly focused on my Searing Nightmare damage, my Shadow Crash damage, and getting out Devouring Plagues and Mind Games and Mind Blasts or whatever as much as I can. So, yeah, so in a pack of 3 like that or whatever, if you do pop a Void Form in a group of 3 like right here, then you're going to want to be using your Void Bolts. You don't want to drop Void Bolts here until you're at like 4 or 5 or 6 targets, something like that. In the Warcraft Priests Discord, there's a like cheat sheet that says at what amount of targets you should stop using Void Bolt to be mathematically efficient or whatever. But I just try to go off feel. It's good to have like a general guide in your head that you could be thinking, oh, okay, I'm in a situation with 7 targets. I know that my Void Bolt isn't going to be as important to me here as it would be in a smaller group. And part of that is because in a small group, your Void Bolt your Searing Nightmare is going to do less damage just by the fact that you have less targets, right? So you're better off time-wise to be casting Void Bolts. But in a bigger group, obviously, like the first pull of Necrotic Wake or something, where you have 10 plus targets, your Searing Nightmare is just going to do so much damage that it doesn't matter if you Void Bolt or not. The only time you would really Void Bolt in that situation would be to refresh dots or whatever. So to make sure you don't drop your Vampiric Touches on things, like my Vampiric Touches right here are all falling off the targets. Our tank actually goes down right here, and this is usually a really scary situation, especially in a pack like this with all these stealth claws. They're pretty deadly. And our Prideful spawns right here. It's likely that we're going to wipe here. I'm not sure if we do or not, but yeah, it looks like we're going to. So yeah, we definitely do. So this can be pretty bad, right? But one of the good things that Shadow Priest has going for us is we have got Fade, we have Dispersion, right? So you can really you can kite back when your tank dies for a pretty long time, especially because you have Fade so that you can drop aggro, and then you can kind of stand there and really pump while the other people in your group are running away, kiting the mobs or whatever. And you can also you have a couple instant cast abilities you can use. So you can pop Mindbender, you can pop Shadow Word Pain, Shadow Word Death, any of your Dark Thoughts procs for instant cast Mind Blasts or whatever. All of that stuff. General Mythic Plus 101, try to get a food buff whenever you have some downtime. It's just efficient and you're going to do more damage. I managed to get mine right there as we're waiting for people to catch up. We go back into this Prideful. I have Vampiric Embrace ready in case we ask for it. I immediately want to get my dots onto the target. Shadow Crash is good, even in a one target scenario. So don't feel like you can't cast it or whatever. One of the good things about Shadow Crash is that it gives, I think, 30 Insanity, which is pretty big. So a single, I'm pretty sure it's 30 Insanity. I could be wrong, but if it is 30 Insanity, that's an entire Searing Nightmare cast right there. So you just pop one Shadow Crash and then you have enough Insanity for a Searing Nightmare. Let's see if I use it again here. No, I don't. Okay. So I did pop VE there. Managed to keep us alive a little bit longer, help out with the healing. Take some of that responsibility off of our healer. That's another one of the good things about playing a Shadow Priest is that you have some really passive off-healing. So if instead of having to waste globals casting Wild Growth or casting Rejuvenations on people like a Boomkin would or whatever, you could just, one global, you can press Vampiric Embrace, and then after that you just do damage like usual, and it helps with things. Right here we've got a decent amount of targets. It looks like 7 or maybe even 8. So I'm not Vampiric touching stuff. I just put my Searing Nightmare. So I put Shadow Word Pain on everything, and then I'm trying to hit things as they're grouped up, interrupting when I can. The stuff that's kind of spread out like this makes it harder, and I'm starting to put Vampiric Touch on stuff as they're dying. Devouring Plagues, now that a lot has died. In a pack of like 8+, you don't really want to use Devouring Plague because it's a lot of Insanity, and that Insanity is better spent using Searing Nightmare, right? And see, like right here, I'm doing that Shadow Word Death thing again on the Spiteful mobs to get more Insanity so I can kill this Goliath quicker. These Goliaths are really deadly, so I try to save my my interrupt for their Rebellious Fist cast, this thing right here, because if one of those goes off in a high enough key, that'll one-shot everybody. So you want to be really careful. It's a really good thing to save a Priest kick for, especially because our kick is so long. The cooldown on it is like 45 seconds. So you should basically never use your kick unless, and it depends obviously, like in some packs you have to use it or whatever. But in a coordinated group like this, you should let the people with shorter kicks try and get as many as they can, and save yours for the really deadly stuff. So, because you've only got one kick, and it's going to be on cooldown for a really long time, so you may as well save yours for the really, really deadly stuff. That way, if the people with shorter kicks are kicking other stuff, and maybe they intend to get the thing that's super deadly, but theirs is on cooldown because they kicked something else or whatever, you'll always be the backup, and you can be there to catch the really hard thing that's going to kill you. So, right here, both our fire mages combusted, it looks like. I popped my cooldowns as well. We're about to go into a boss, but because this is a fortified week, and this is a pretty deadly pack, it's got 5 targets or whatever, I'm trying not to... It doesn't matter so much that I pop my cooldowns on trash rather than on the boss. Once you get into the really high fortified keys, you're going to almost always want to pop your cooldowns on trash rather than bosses, because the trash just gets so scary and deadly at those higher levels. With these Spiteful Shades, they can be CC'd, stunned, feared, all that stuff. So when I notice one's on me and it's getting pretty close, I try to Psychic Horror it so that it just stops moving towards me. Your Psychic Horror is a 4-second stun, so it's long enough that when you stun it, the Spiteful is going to lose like a third of its health over the course. So if you stun it at like 30-40% HP, something like that, you could just stun it and it'll die by the time your stun wears off. Right here again, I'm trying to snipe things as they're dying with my Shadow or Death for the Death and Madness. We're going into a Prideful. I instantly want to get my dots up. I'll probably pop Mindbender here as well to help do some damage to these things, because the Pridefuls have a decent amount of health as well. Pridefuls are another good thing to drop Mindbender, Void Form. Usually I don't pop all my cooldowns for a Prideful, but like, especially if you're running Mindbender, it's only a 1-minute cooldown, which is pretty short, and it does pretty good damage, so it's fine to use it here. You want to be very careful doing what I just did. If you Shadow or Death on Prideful, it's really, really sketchy, because your health is going to be pretty low anyway, and you can kill yourself quite easily. So we were saving Lust for this pack, which is why I didn't pop Mindbender, it seems, because for this boss, because I want to blast, right? So I pop everything here: Power Infusion, Mindbender, Void Form. Typically, you want to get your dots up. You want to use Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Mind Games if you're a Venthyr. And then after you've popped all your stuff and they're on cooldown, that's when you Void Form. Especially the Mind Blast thing. Because as soon as you enter Void Form, your Mind Blast cooldown resets to 0. So if you go Mind Blast, Void Form, you can instantly Mind Blast again. I don't know how that hit me, by the way. You can instantly Mind Blast again. So you could basically have 3 Mind Blasts right in a row. So you go Mind Blast, Void Form, and then you can Mind Blast again, and you can Mind Blast right after that, because you have 2 stacks, right? So, and if you get a Dark Thoughts proc, you can Mind Blast just a ton of times. So depending on what you're running, like maybe you're running Fortress of the Mind or whatever, your Mind Blast becomes more valuable in that situation. You can get some really good effectiveness out of that. So we managed to kill that boss. We're moving on to this next area. This next area in Spires of Ascension, Shadow Priest really shines, because pretty much everything here is humanoid, which means you can Mind Soothe it. And that means you don't have to bring a rogue, you don't have to use Invis Pots or anything. You can just walk by a lot of this stuff. We end up pulling this Helion? I think it's a Helion. I think Helion has 2 L's. I don't know. Anyway, so something that I need to improve on is not missing my Shadow Crashes. Excuse me. It can be pretty hard because Shadow Crash, the mobs move around a lot, right? So you're better off, you have to aim your Shadow Crash. So if you try to predict where the mobs are going, sometimes you can get it right, and if you're like familiar with where you're pulling stuff and stuff like that, it's a lot easier. But it's a lot better to use it when stuff is just not moving and there's no chance you're going to miss, right? You need to find the balance between getting as many casts of it as possible in the dungeon and not missing. Because with every spell, one of the biggest things about Mythic Plus is you want to use every spell as much as possible, right? That was like a super clutch kick, by the way. Or that Rebellious Fist almost went off. It was like 0.1 seconds. Anyway, so a lot of people will save their cooldowns, their big cooldowns, for bosses only, because they want to make sure the boss dies, and it's like a boss fight, so you're like, oh, I have to have all my big damage abilities here. And that is the case a lot of the time. Like, you obviously want to do... Bosses are usually more deadly than trash, so you want to do as much damage as possible on them. But one of the big things that separates like somebody who can do a 10 from somebody who can do a 16 or a 17, in my eyes, is just getting the most effectiveness out of your spells as possible. So maybe somebody who's doing a 10 will cast Void Form, let's say, 8 times in a key, and that's just like 1 for every boss, and then maybe 1 in between every boss, right? But depending on the key, sometimes you can get 12, 13, 14 void form casts over the course of the key, and that's just gonna, by the nature of casting it more, you're gonna do more damage, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Try and obviously you need to save your big cooldowns for the really deadly, dangerous stuff. But if you know that there's going to be 2 minutes, let's say, between really deadly pulls, or between the pull you're working on now and the next really deadly pull that you need cooldowns for, go ahead and pop your 2-minute cooldowns, because it's just going to help, right? A lot of people will save stuff, like I said before, for certain situations, but you need to try and familiarize yourself with the dungeon enough that you could be like, okay, we don't have another really scary pull coming up for a minute and a half. I'm going to use Power Infusion here, right? Just to eke out a little bit more damage than you would typically. Something else that I try to do, especially running with 2 Fire Mages, is when I'm really dry on damage, like I don't have Void Form, I don't have Mindbender, I've got really nothing to make my damage any more than just like my baseline damage. But one of our Fire Mages has Combust or something. I try to look for a target who can use my Power Infusion better than I could. And even like our healer, if I need to, if healing is going to look really bad, then maybe I'll throw it to my healer, but that's pretty rare. I usually try to, if I'm not going to use it, then I'll drop it on a Fire Mage while they're combusted. And it's just better, more efficient for the team, right? Almost always, I use Power Infusion on myself, but I plan on crafting the Power Infusion Legendary, Twins of the Sun Priestess. I plan on crafting that probably next week, if not the week after that. And I think that's going to be a pretty big upgrade. I would say I'll most likely, I have to play with it a little bit, I think, but the way it's looking, I'll probably run that more often than I run Eternal Call to the Void, which is the Void Tendril Legendary that I've been running. I've had some people ask about Talbadar's Stratagem, but I'm not a huge fan. I think it's a pretty good single target Legendary, but I think when you get into a Mythic Plus scenario like this, you lose a ton of value from it. So I really don't think it's worth it. And outside of Twins of the Sun Priestess, Eternal Call to the Void, and Talbadar's Stratagem, I don't really know if there's another Legendary that is like even close to those as far as effectiveness. Maybe I'm wrong though, and maybe it depends on what Covenant and what Soul Binds and Talents and everything you're running. In which case, yeah, I mean, you gotta, use what works best for you. So, me personally, I use the Void Tendril Legendary just because it's passive. It has a really good proc rate. Well, not really good, but it has a pretty good proc rate, and it seems to sim the highest on the Warcraft Priest's sims. So, okay, so we're almost done with the key. We're moving into these last couple angels that are pretty deadly. This is one of my least favorite platforms in all of Shadowlands right now, just because the camera angles are so awful. There's, like, right there, like, there's no really good camera angle where you can not get wings in your face the entire time. Unless you zoom in pretty far, but you're, like, incentivized not to zoom in very far because of these spears that get placed everywhere. You want to see where they are, so it's pretty important to be pretty far zoomed out. But if you zoom out really far, you get angel wings in your face the whole time, so it's pretty annoying. But it looks pretty, I guess, so that's good. So anyway, on these, it's just single target fights the whole time. We save, on fortified weeks like this especially, we save Lust and our big cooldowns for the third angel because it's really deadly. So right here, I'm trying to keep Vampiric Touch up on the target. I'm trying to Shadow Word Death as it's dying. I pop Mind Games to finish it off right there. These mobs, by the way, be very careful if you're running Surrender to Madness, because when their health hits 0, they don't instantly die. So if you're running Surrender to Madness, you need to plan on them still being quote-unquote alive for like 2 seconds after their health hits 0, just because they have like a little bit of RP when they die to actually die. So if you pop Surrender to Madness on one of these mobs, and it hits 0 HP right as your Surrender to Madness ends, you will die. Even though the mob has no health, it's not technically dead, so you'll die. So keep that in mind. If you are going to run Surrender to Madness, then, try to use it later rather than earlier, right? Yeah, so anyway, Shadow Crashing, popping Devouring Plague as much as I can, Shadow Word Death, all that good stuff. It's really pretty simple when you get to a single target rotation like this, especially when you're not popping cooldowns. Basically, like your main filler rotation is just keep your dots up, Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain, and then Devouring Plague as much as possible, and Mind Blast in between, right? You can use your Mindbender as well if you're not popping all your cooldowns. Mindbender is a pretty easy, quick cooldown to use, so don't be afraid to use that one pretty often. And it does pretty good damage, so don't underestimate it. So right here is the last Angel, arguably more deadly than the boss on Fortified. So I don't know why our Fire Mage is still over there, just chilling, I guess. This is where we're going to pop our cooldowns and Lust. Lust is about to come off. There it is. So there we go. We pop Lust. I Shadow Crash, Mind Games, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, should Devouring Plague again. Excuse me. It looks like I'm not actually going to pop Power Infusion and Void Form here, because both our Fire Mages combusted there, I'm pretty sure. I was saving Vampiric Embrace for this as well, just in case the healing got really out of hand, because that dot we get is pretty big. But it looks like I didn't use it here either. With Grievous especially, Prideful is super deadly. Anything that has like big pulsing AoE like that is 100 times worse with Grievous, because Grievous is going to start ticking on everybody, and it's going to add on a lot of damage. Oh, it looks like I was actually saving my Vampiric Embrace for this Prideful. I forgot about that. Yeah, so I'll pop Mindbender here. You need to have like a decent... Somebody's got to pop at least like a 1.5 minute cooldown on every Prideful, because you have to kill it before it hits a certain amount of stacks, or you're just going to die. And you can't... Most classes can't do enough like basic filler damage to kill a Prideful in time, unless you have a really beefy healer, let's say. So I pop VE. It's currently helping everybody out. I also try to Desperate Prayer on those when I'm like down to 40% HP or something. It raises your max HP by 25%, and it also heals you for that amount. And the heal is the thing that's really important. As far as Mythic Plus goes, really, as far as anything goes, as long as you don't hit 0 HP, it doesn't matter how much HP you have. Within reason, right? I don't pop Desperate Prayer for the extra 25% max HP. I do pop it for the heal that it gives you for 25% of your new max HP, which is pretty big. It's a pretty big self-heal. There are times where you might pop it for to like soak an ability or something, so that it gives you enough of a health pool to soak the ability without dying. But yeah, typically use it as a heal. Right here, we're just grabbing the orbs. I save Mass Dispel every single time here for this moment right here where we're about to throw the spear. You want to make sure nobody has the dot as you're throwing the spear, and Mass Dispel can dispel all 5 of you, so try not to step on the puddles. Make sure everybody groups up around the spear, drop your Mass Dispel, and it makes this phase really, really clean and easy to deal with. So we're back into the single target rotation. I'm popping Mind Games when I can. I'm using Dark Thoughts while I'm channeling Mind Seer or Mind Flay. I'm using those Void Bolts on that are outside of Void Form as soon as possible. Right here, my Vampiric Touch is about to fall off, so I need to get that back up as soon as possible. Boom, it's up. I'm watching for where those barriers drop. I'm popping Void Form. I need to dodge this, manage to dodge it, keep an eye on the boss where she's going. He or she, I'm not sure. I'm using my trinket as much as possible. Yeah, basically it's pretty simple, not too crazy. Like I said before, I'm running Hungering Void, which is making my Void Bolt really, really high priority. So maybe I'll let my Vampiric Touch stay off the target for a little bit, just to make sure I get that Void Bolt out, rather than casting Vampiric Touch while I have a Void Bolt ready. Yeah, but outside of that, that's the basic single target rotation, right? Right here, I'm probably going to pop everything. No point not to. Boss is almost dead. Pop Power Infusion, Mind Games, Devouring Plague, Vampiric Embrace even, to help with the healing. I should use Shadow Word Death soon, because it's doing extra damage. There we go. That's one thing that I need to work on, is using Shadow Word Death not only to snipe things as they die, but to do extra damage while they're in that execute range. And there we go. That's the end of the key. 16 plus 1'd it. That's the 17 Plaguefall that we ended up doing, is that new keystone right there. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. Feel free to join my Discord. All that good stuff. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.